Wonderful night for a ball game here in San Diego at Jack Murphy Stadium, just as you might expect. And a big crowd is gathering, and why not? There's a pennant race going on in the National League West. The Padres by a half game over both the Rockies and the Dodgers, who won their ball game in San Francisco a little while ago. Hello, everyone. I'm John Miller, along with Joe Morgan, your Sunday night telecasters. Nice to see you again, Joe.
Nice to see you,
Missed you last Sunday. Now, we've got the San Diego Padres, and this is a ball club with a lot of new talent, guys like Wally Joyner, and of course tonight's starting pitcher Bob Tewksbury, but also some veteran guys who are doing real well, like Steve Finley having his best year ever, and Ken Caminetti, who also is having an outstanding year for them.
You also got Rickey Henderson. But look, when the Padres got off to a great start this year, it was because of pitching and defense. They did not make any mistakes in the clutch. They got off to a 35-20 start because of that. Now they've got Wally Joyner back, and I really believe at this stage of their careers, Wally Joyner is more important to the Padres than Tony Gwynn. A lot of people will disagree with that, but they need Joyner's power in this lineup.
Well, he's back, and they have been playing well since he's been back. Now, John Flaherty and Chris Gomez, a couple of newcomers from the Tigers, have also been integral parts of this ball club. Now, Tewksbury is going tonight, and he'll be facing those big Rocky sluggers like Dante Bichette, Andres Galarraga, Vinny Castilla. But the Rockies don't seem to hit that well when they're away from Denver.
But if they're going to get started, they picked a good night to get started because Tewksbury will come after you. He does not nibble. He will throw strikes, which makes the hitters more aggressive. If you're not aggressive against Tewksbury, he will beat you easily. So I expect him to come out swinging the bats tonight.
All right. So coming up here from Jack Murphy Stadium, Bob Tewksbury, the veteran right-hander, will be on the mound against the Rockies with the National League second leading hitter, Eric Young, National League slugging leader, Ellis Burks, and RBI leader, Dante Bichette. It's the Rockies and the Padres on the ESPN Sunday Night Game of the Week. John Miller and Joe Morgan, ESPN Sunday Night Baseball from San Diego. We take a look very closely at the National League Western Division pennant race. There's Don Baylor, the manager of this young Rockies franchise. And his club is leading the league with 6 runs per game, but not so many when they're on the road. Also second in the league in home run hitting, but again, they don't hit so many when they're away from Denver. So we'll see how they do here tonight. It'll be Eric Young leading it off at second base. Walt Weiss, the veteran shortstop. Ellis Burks having a fine season in left field. Second, in fact, leading the league in slugging percentage. It'll be Dante Bichette, who leads the league in RBIs in right field. Andres, the big cat Galarraga, at first base, having another great year. Vinny Castilla is at third base. He, too, hitting a lot of home runs again. Jeff Reed, the catcher. Quentin McCracken is in center field. And Marvin Freeman, the right-hander, is on the mound, 7 and 5. And on the mound for the San Diego Padres, veteran right-hander Bob Tewksbury.
And you see Tewksbury's record, but his positive when you have him on the mound is that he will throw strikes. That makes the defense sharper. They're on their toes, and they're ready to play. So I think Bob Tewksbury is a perfect pitcher for the San Diego Padre-type baseball team because they are a good defensive ball club as well.
Tewksbury, 35 years of age, and there is Eric Young. He was a .345 batting average for the year, 6 home runs and 45 RBIs. And he's turned into an outstanding base stealer as well, and he takes a called strike. So right away, Tewksbury comes out throwing strikes. Young has stolen 32 bases for the year. This is Caminetti. He throws him out. So just like that, Eric Young is retired.
And you see what Tewksbury does. He goes right after him, and you take a look at the defense that plays behind him. Caminetti, one of the best defensive players in the National League, won a Gold Glove last year at third base, has a rifle arm, and here's one of the plays he made last night. Dante Bichette drills it down the line. Now look at that gun across the diamond. He's supposed to have a frayed rotator cuff. Now watch him make these throws. I mean, that's saying that his arm is less than 100%. Here's Eric Young, and he throws another strike. So if something's wrong with his arm, every third baseman should wish they had the same problem.
And it's hard to believe that there could be something wrong. Here's Walt Weiss, veteran shortstop, hitting .306, having one of his better years offensively. Hit a home run here last night and foul tips one. And quickly the count is 0-2. Walt Weiss, Ellis Burks on deck. Now this Rockies team, it's been dramatic. In fact, stunning the way they have hit at home versus the way they have not hit away from home. This is right to Wally Joyner at first base. He's one of the outstanding fielding first basemen around. Got an easy play there. for the unassisted putout. 2 men down, and now Ellis Burks. And you get a look at the big crowd that has gathered here. Last night, they had more than 55,000 paid admissions, and that was the largest paid attendance in the history of the Padres, dating all the way back to 1969. Ellis Burks, a .333 batting average, 24 homers, 78 runs batted in. And that's a strike on the outside. You see 81 miles an hour. And, I mean, the radar gun is just sort of it's a novelty with Tewksbury out there because he just doesn't throw very hard.
But he has a lot of movement on his pitches. And movement sometimes is far more important than speed. And when you talk about Ellis Burks, he's one of the few Rockies who does well on the road as well as hit well in Coors Field. He's hitting .300 both places.
And hit that one down off his foot. Well, in fact, we'll have a look at it here.
It was a sinker in, and he hit it off his shin, which, I mean, that really hurts.
So he's been trying to shake it off. Tewksbury, meanwhile, has thrown 7 pitches in this inning. Every one of them strikes. In the twilight out here in Southern California, the late afternoon shadows beginning to advance upon home plate. Pretty sight out here with the big crowd. That's a fastball down and away. 1 ball and 2 strikes. Now, a lot is made of Coors Field being a great hitter's ballpark. This has become a pretty good home run hitter's ballpark right here. On the fists and a foul right back to the screen.
You see the pattern that Tewksbury is using already in this ball game. He's getting ahead of the hitters with breaking ball sliders away, and then he comes right back inside with 2 strikes and tries to hit him on the fist. He accomplished that with Eric Young, Walt Weiss, and he just tried to jam Burks. Burks fouled it back, but that's the pattern that he has been using so far in this inning.
And he took it. Pretty good eye there. 2 balls and 2 strikes. Ellis Burks, 31 years of age, came up to the Boston Red Sox. A lot of injury problems over the years. Struck him out with a curveball, and the Rockies go 1-2-3 against Tewksbury. Now we'll see Marvin Freeman, who's a little bit of a harder thrower than Tewksbury. ESPN Sunday Night Baseball from San Diego. No score as the Padres get ready to bat now in the last of the first inning. Here's Bruce Bochy, the Padres manager. His ball club tied for 4th in the league in runs per game. And although they are 11th in the league in home runs, they have been hitting a lot of home runs the last 3 weeks or so, or about since the re-arrival of Wally Joyner. Rickey Henderson leads it off in left field. Chris Gomez, the former Tiger, he's been hitting the ball beautifully, back in the lineup tonight. Steve Finley, who's gotten some muscles lately, hitting a lot of home runs and doubles in center field. Ken Caminetti having another fine year at third base. Wally Joyner back in there at first base. Mark Newfield in for the injured Tony Gwynn in right field. John Flaherty's had a real hot streak, 22 consecutive games after coming over. He did not hit in his first 2 games, and he's hit in every one since then, since leaving the Tigers. And it'll be Jody Reed at second. Bob Tewksbury, the pitcher, hits 9th. On the mound for the Rockies is the big right-hander, 33-year-old Marvin Freeman. 7 wins, 5 losses.
Marvin Freeman has a good fastball, slider, and a splitter. Last year, he was one of the Rockies' most reliable pitchers. He has really struggled this year, but he's the type of pitcher who is, if he's hot, he can dominate an offense.
Marvin Freeman, 2 years ago, 10-2 for the Rockies, and had a nice big contract after that, and he's been trying to live up to it ever since. Here is Rickey Henderson. And Rickey wants you to pay special attention to that on-base average. The batting average is terrible, but he still gets a lot of walks. And that on-base average is over 400, which is, frankly, you like to see it for a leadoff man, and he's been scoring lots of runs.
And all that is great, John, except this is not the Rickey Henderson that the Padres wanted to see. This is not the Rickey Henderson that the Oakland A's had for so long. I think Rickey has lost a lot of his aggressiveness. Now he is basically just going up there looking for bases on balls. It takes a lot of pitches that he could hit now, like that fastball right there, looking to get ahead in the count and trying to draw a base on balls. And more evidence of that is the fact he's only hit 1 leadoff home run this year. And he has a record of 68 leadoff home runs, which is more than any other leadoff hitter ever.
And that means leading off a game.
aggressive, and I think that's part of his problem. Rickey Henderson is a very good hitter, so you know, a lot of people think of him as a guy that gets a lot of walks, etc., and he does, but he's also a good hitter who can drive in runs in clutch situations, and he hasn't done that this year.
That's a drive deep down the left field line. This one is foul back into the bullpen area. 327 down the line. And you see the panoramic look out here, the Mission Valley. And they have not had many crowds like this over the last few years. However, they've already had 12 crowds this year of 40,000 and above, equaling a franchise record. Rickey takes up and in, and the count is 2 balls and 2 strikes. 55,000 last night. And by the time everything's counted tonight, they have another 35 or 40,000. They're already about 300,000 plus ahead of last year's final attendance out here. Swung on and foul tip, strike 3. Reed held on to it, and there is one away.
Well, let's take a look at the Colorado defense. Here you see Eric Young is the guy we're going to focus in on. He only had 11 errors last year, 3 so far this year, and a lot of the credit has to go with the fact that he's worked very hard this summer and winter just to be a good defensive player. He had problems the last couple of years, but now he's a very solid second baseman.
Here's Chris Gomez, a Southern Californian, come back to his home area after being traded over from the Tigers. He takes a called strike, and look at that average since coming over here, 360 in 100 at-bats. A far cry from what he'd been doing in Detroit. He takes low and outside. He actually, after a real fast start a couple of years ago, drove in quite a few runs for the Tigers, but then really tailed off, and the last couple of years it was a major disappointment there. And that's a foul. 1 ball and 2 strikes to Chris Gomez, but now here he is. He said he was really disappointed in the trade because he'd been signed by the Tigers, been trying to help them win, and then to be traded, it was kind of a shock. But now he's in a pennant race back in Southern California, and his whole life has turned around. Down on strikes he goes. Marvin Freeman off to an impressive start, 2 straight strikeouts. And now we'll get a look at Steve Finley, who's been one of the great stories out here. Finley is hitting 300, 18 homers, 32 doubles, 7 triples, and 60 runs batted in. He's got more extra base hits than anybody in the league. And seems to have a little more upper body strength than he used to. He used to be just a real skinny guy who hit a lot of singles. But now he's got some power, and befitting what he's been doing, Joe, they've moved him to the number 3 spot in the order.
Well, he has been a very productive hitter. I mean, he was a very good trade that brought him here to San Diego because he's also a good defensive player.
Right to the second baseman, Eric Young. And both sides go down 1, 2, 3 here in the first inning. We're heading to the second. Dante Bichette, the league's RBI leader, then Galarraga and Castilla coming up. No score. ESPN Sunday Night Baseball, our 7th year of coverage every Sunday, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Rocky Mountain, and 5 Pacific. And as they like to say here in San Diego, or at least they were saying after winning the first 2 ball games of this series, before the Rockies won last night, they like to see the Rockies play here and hit at sea level. They have not hit quite as well, or even close to as well, at sea level as they've hit in that mile-high air of Denver. And here's one guy, Dante Bichette, who has become a star in Denver, but even he has not hit as well away from home this year. Last year, he hit 300 on the road. Tewksbury, 2 low for ball 1.
Not only did he hit 300, he hit 9 home runs and drove in 45 runs on the road last year. This year, he's hitting 253 on the road, 5 home runs, 26 runs batted in so far. So there is a big difference this year as compared to last year.
That one got away from Tewksbury. 2-0 the count. Of course, it got away from him at 69 miles an hour. I don't think Bichette was too terrorized on that one. Galarraga and Castilla will follow. The power is up. That slider misses. Wow. 3-0. What's happened to Tewksbury, Joe?
Well, he's getting to the middle of this lineup. First of all, you're facing Bichette and Galarraga's on deck. You have to be careful with these hitters, and I think he definitely has to be careful with Bichette.
fastballs in there. I mean, 3 straight pitches out of the strike zone. That's one of the worst stretches of wildness I've ever seen him have.
Well, not only that, Bichette has a pretty good eye at the plate. He doesn't chase a lot of pitches when he's ahead in the count.
3-1 to Dante. Joe, that should have been the one he pulled out of here for a home run, I thought.
That's why Tewksbury is such a good pitcher. If he's going to give up a home run, it's going to be a solo home run. 3-1, he says, I'm going to throw you a strike. Swing the bat. I mean,
Bichette at the sinker. Bounces it foul. 3-2.
But see what happens there, John, is 3-1. Bichette was looking for a pitch middle of the plate in that he could pull. He hit the outside corner with it. Now he's looking out over the plate, and he threw him a sinker in. He threw him a fastball inside. And that's the pitch that has been effective so far for Tewksbury because it sets up his other pitches. And he will throw a breaking ball. He will throw you anything 3-2.
On the hands, a bloop. And that will fall base hit. Shortstop Gomez started out after it, but Dante Bichette muscles one into the outfield for the first hit of the game. And now, Andres Galarraga.
A lot of people say that this is a blue pit, but this is really good hitting by Bichette. He gets jammed, but he's strong enough that he keeps the ball in play, and it goes for a base hit. Remember now, he jammed Walt Weiss, he jammed Eric Young, and he tried to jam Burks. None of those guys were able to get a base hit off of that pitch. So even though it wasn't pretty, he still muscled the ball into the outfield like he's supposed to.
Well, as we saw Bichette, the RBI leader, here is Galarraga, who is right behind him in the National League. 82 RBIs. The 2 of them are the only 2 in the National League who have more than 80 runs batted in for the year up till now. Curveball, a little tap foul. It's funny, you know, the last couple of years, Joe, I mean, most of the Rockies, of course, have hit much better at home. I mean, the teams who come in hit better when they go there than they hit in other ballparks. But Galarraga was a guy who also hit real well away from the light air of Denver. But he has been terrible this year. Going into play last night, he was below 200 on the road with his batting average this year. Wide open batting stance. He takes it. Well, it looked like they're trying to be a little more patient in this inning.
Well, the big guys, Galarraga and Bichette, they're up there hitting, and Tewksbury is a guy that knows that he can get them to chase some pitches out of the strike zone if he can get ahead in the count. They're not going to stray out of the strike zone if they're not behind in the count.
Bichette back to the bag at first. Rockies like to run. They've stolen 105 bases this year. And Bichette, while he looks like a great big strong guy, runs real well. He has 18 steals for the year. Joyner on the bag with him. On the fists, Tewksbury to Joyner, and that's on number 1. Bichette moves over to second.
I did not see the last time Tewksbury pitched against the Rockies, but apparently he threw him a lot of pitches away, breaking balls away. But the first 5 hitters he has faced, he has tried to get them all out with the fastball inside. And he's been successful against all but Bichette. So that seems to be his pattern in this ball game. And I would think that when he pitched maybe in Denver, he was out away from them and they hit the balls into the right center field gaps, etc. Now he's going to stay inside whenever he gets a chance. He goes away with the breaking balls and in with the fastballs.
Vinny Castilla, and he takes high for ball 1. Castilla had been with the Atlanta Braves. They signed him from Saltillo of the Mexican League back in 1990. He was the 20th choice for the Rockies in the expansion draft, which we covered on ESPN. Ball 2, 2-0. And he and his wife, Samantha, just had their first child. They were born during the spring. He was an all-star last year. First Colorado Rockies player to start in the all-star game. He had 32 homers last year. That slider breaking for third, Bichette, and he'll make it there as Gomez throws out Castilla. Decided to get the sure out at first base there.
If there would have been 1 down in this inning, he would have taken Bichette at third base. But with 2 down, you go ahead and take the sure man at first base. Because if you do not get Bichette, obviously, now you have runner at first and third with less than 2 outs. So that's the reason that he did that.
Now Jeff Reed. Yeah, but there was 1 out.
Yeah, but I mean, if there was no outs, he would have gone to first base, over to third base.
I thought you were into something so technical.
I wanted to know what I was talking about.
I had no idea.
Yeah, but I mean, he would have been, you know, if there was no outs and he gets over to third base, then obviously he can score on a fly ball. But with one down, you go ahead and take the runner at first base.
That'll take a base hit or a San Diego mistake. Jeff Reed, left-handed hitter, hitting .281. 2-0 the count. Rockies have had some injury problems. Right now they're missing Larry Walker, and that's a pretty big guy to miss. Yeah. Great defensive outfielder, great arm, runs well, steals bases, hits home runs, hits for average. I mean, he does it all, and was doing it all until he got hurt. They're hoping, Don Baylor said he hopes that maybe he'll be back in a week or two into the month of August, which would be a boon to them. But they're also missing probably their two best starting pitchers, Brett Saberhagen, who may be all finished, and also Billy Swift. Popped up. Joyner backpedaling. Jody Reed also there, but Joyner's under it. And in fair territory makes the catch. Leadoff single for Bichette, but he is stranded. Ken Caminiti, then Wally Joyner. No score. Sunday Night Baseball from San Diego. John Miller, Joe Morgan here with you. No score as the Padres come to bat in the last of the second inning. Ken Caminiti, 33-year-old veteran, a switch hitter, will lead it off. He's going to become quite a leader, just because he's vocal and that sort of thing, but because the guy plays with such determination. That is a fair ball. Right along the third base line, heading down the left field line. Chasing after it down there is Burks. Into second with a stand-up double is Ken Caminiti.
We talked about the slider and the splitter. It looked like a splitter, and he just slaps it off the end of the bat. Actually, it was inside, but he inside-outed the ball down the third baseline, and he gets a double.
He's a guy, Joe, it seems like he's really benefited by leaving the Astrodome. I mean, we knew he was a good player there, but now all of a sudden in a ballpark that's a much better hitter's park, he's putting up the numbers that really bring some attention. Caminiti had 26 home runs last year, a career record in his first year here in San Diego. 17 already this year. The batter, Wally Joyner, taking ball one.
I think part of the improvement also has been, John, he's a much better hitter from the left side now than he was before.
Joyner pops it up foul right back toward us. And into the second deck. 1 ball and 1 strike. Wally Joyner. Now, he has not been hitting home runs. He has only 6 home runs this year, but he has been one of the very best in either league with men in scoring position, in the clutch, in spots like this.
When you describe power, you know, a lot of people take it to mean that you only hit the ball out of the ballpark. Power means that you produce runs and you produce extra base hits, and he's a very good run producer.
There's Wally's fan club. What kind of a comment are they making, Joe, about Wally's, you know, kind of starting to thin out on top now? And those are his fans. Now, for me personally, I think that's a good look.
I do too, John. That's okay.
I told Wally before the game, I said, you know, you're looking better than I've ever seen.
John, it works on some people. I don't think it would work on me, but it's a pretty good look for some guys.
Hey, Joe, come on. I fantasize about you with that look, and I know that you would look fantastic. There's way too much hair up there, man. 2-2 the count. That's a little tap. That'll get Cameron into third base. Reed throws out Joyner. So with 1 down, the Padres have a man at third base, and Mark Newfield is coming up. By the way, Tony Gwynn, Newfield is in there in place of Gwynn. I talked to Tony before the game tonight, and he had his foot in a cast, and then he's been walking with a splint. Just the last 2 days, he's been cleared to actually start doing something. And what he's doing is he goes out without the splint and walks for a half hour in the morning, and then a half hour in the afternoon. And today, for the first time, he even took a little batting practice. He is hopeful he might be back in as little as a couple of weeks, although Bruce Bochy doesn't think it'll be possible for him to get back before mid-August. They pull in at the corners here for Newfield. Fastball is inside.
This is interesting. They're going to play the infield back for Baylor played the infield in the first inning a couple of nights ago, and he's done it quite often during the year where he'd play the infield in this situation. And the thing that surprises me is that they have not scored a lot of runs on the road, and maybe this is when you would pull the infield in. But it also tells your team when you do this in the first inning that you don't have a lot of confidence in them scoring a lot of runs. So maybe he's trying to make a psychological statement here.
2-0 to Newfield, and he takes a slider. Check swing, an appeal denied by Randy Marsh, the first base umpire. So it is 3-0 to Newfield. He's a big, impressive-looking guy, hitting .267. 5 homers, 25 batted in. He and veteran Rob Deere and Chris Gwynn have been splitting the right field duties since Tony Gwynn went there. Strike.
On a breaking ball. From a breaking ball, he felt like Newfield was swinging on that, so he threw him a slider. And Newfield took it. Actually, looked like he was going to swing. 3-0.
John Flaherty on deck, one of the hottest hitters in baseball right now. Right to third. That'll hold Caminiti. And Castilla throws out Mark Newfield. So Newfield unable to get that runner home from third with less than 2 down. Now here is Flaherty.
The funny part about that, John, if he hits the ball to shortstop or second base, they get a run, but he pulls it to third base. As a hitter, you have to think about those things while you're at the plate.
John Flaherty. Now, he was with the Tigers. The Tigers had the worst record in the majors. I mean, everything was just falling apart in Detroit. And then he gets traded to San Diego, and he becomes one of the hottest hitters in baseball. Explain that for me, Joe, in 10 words or less.
I can't.
Well, that's 10 words or less. Look at this. 23 consecutive game hitting streak for John Flaherty. And this one puts the Padres ahead. Caminiti scores. 1-0 San Diego.
Well, when San Diego was struggling earlier, losing a lot of ball games, they lost 9 of 11 at one point. They could not get a base hit in this situation. Both of these hits they've acquired this inning, neither one of them been hit hard. This ball was not hit hard. He actually hit it off the end of the bat, but he hit it back through the middle for a base hit. The double by Caminiti was not hit hard. So when things are going well for you, you get the breaks.
So that equals the longest hitting streak by anybody this year. The batter is Jody Reed, the veteran, and he takes a called strike. Reed hitting .240, 1 home run, and 33 runs batted in. 1 out, or rather 1 in, and 2 out, and 1 on. Flaherty is not much of a threat to steal a base, although he's done even that. He has a steal. There's the list of the hitting streaks for the year. Marty Cordova, last year's Rookie of the Year in the American League, had the longest one until Flaherty equaled him tonight, and Roberto Alomar of Baltimore had the second longest at 22. Hits home plate off the catcher, Jeff Reed, and over to second base goes Flaherty. All right, now first base is open. The pitcher's on deck, and it's a 2-1 count to Jody Reed.
Well, he was stopped at second base because the ball actually went into the dugout. Watch this ball. It will bounce in front of the plate. And really no chance for Reed to block the ball. He tried to stay in front of it, and you see it rolls into the Padre dugout. So he only gets second base.
All right, you walk Jody Reed now?
Well, I don't think you do. No, not this early in the ball game.
2-1 the count to Jody. Way outside. Marvin seems to have lost his release point. That's pretty good technical talk.
That was very technical. But you're correct. I mean, what he did on that particular pitch, he dropped his arm a little more than he had been before. Earlier in the ballgame, he was throwing a slider. He was throwing it from up over the top. On that particular pitch, he dropped his arm way down, a little less than 3/4.
3-1 the count now. That time is taken. It's 3-1, Joe. At least he's going to pitch around it here. I don't think he can throw him a strike now.
What he's going to do is just try to make a good pitch, a quality pitch. They're going to pitch to whatever weakness they think Jody Reed has. Up and in.
It is now 3-2 to Jody.
If that's where he was trying to throw it, but he did come after him. Again, I don't think you can start to just walk hitters, especially 8th place hitters, unless the game is on the line. See, the target is low and away.
3-2 the count to Reed. Flaherty, the runner at second. 1-0. The Padres ahead. Ooh, the splitter. Strike 3 call. And Reed goes back to have a few words with Mike Winters, the plate umpire, about that one. All right. He didn't walk him. He struck him out. 1-0 San Diego. Sunday Night Baseball continuing from Jack Murphy Stadium. With Joe Morgan, this is John Miller. The Padres won, the Rockies nothing. Coming up tomorrow night at 7:30 Eastern, it's the season premiere of NFL Prime Monday. Mike Tirico and Sterling Sharp will have all the latest training camp news, as well as a special report from Chris Mortensen. That's NFL Prime Monday tomorrow, 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 here in San Diego on ESPN. Little bloop by Quentin McCracken, base hit down the left field line. Henderson over to field it, and McCracken will hold with a single. So, for the second inning in a row, the Rockies get a leadoff single.
Well, again, it's a fastball in. He jams McCracken, but McCracken's able to fight it off. See, that pitch is way inside. He fights it off, and he flares one down the left field line for a base hit. And again, you can just watch Tewksbury's pattern so far. He's trying to jam all of the Rockies hitters. I think he'll change that the second time around in the lineup.
Marvin Freeman, what do you think he's going to do here, Joe?
He's going to try to bunt, and hopefully he'll get it down for his team.
It's a pretty easy call.
Yeah,
they could have asked us to flash that sign from up here.
I don't even know if they gave him a sign.
I mean, we could have flashed a sign like 40 feet long. Bunt, Marvin. Marvin, look at that. He's bunting. But he fouled it back and out of play. Marvin has 4 hits in 35 at-bats.
Well, the toughest pitch to bunt is the fastball up and in. This pitch is up and in, and you see what Freeman does with it. Anytime you think a hitter is bunting, you try to throw the ball up in the strike zone or even higher than the strike zone, because if he bunts it, usually he'll pop it up.
That's what I don't understand. Why did he bunt at it? Why not just move back from when it's that high? Why? Well, that was
I'll tell you what I used to say when I played, and they'd make a statement like that. It looks easier from up here than it does in that batter's box.
Well, especially in slow motion.
Yeah.
That's when I thought of it. It's so easy in slow motion.
When he's throwing 80-something miles an hour, and you have, a split second to make up your mind, it looks a little tougher.
Of course, it was amazing that he even bunted it foul with his eyes closed like that. 0-2 the count to Marvin. The runner going. Flaherty's throw. Sing! Quick tag at second base by the shortstop Gomez, but McCracken gets his 6th steal of the year.
I think that's a smart play if you get the opportunity, especially with a pitcher bunting, because when he squares around, though, it keeps the catcher back. And so he takes it back. The catcher cannot come forward. He holds the catcher back, and it gives the runner a chance to get into second base. Very close play there, but appears to be safe.
Gomez stuck his foot right in harm's way there, didn't he? Marvin squaring the bunt, takes just off the outside from Tewksbury. 2 balls and 2 strikes now to Freeman. Leadoff man Eric Young is on deck. 1-0. The Padres lead the Rockies. The Rockies with a man at second and nobody out. Joyner still very shallow at first base, and it's bunted foul for strike 3. Freeman is down. Now here's an update with Linda Cohn.
Thanks, John. Network MCI takes us to the ballpark at Arlington, Texas, getting going and getting going early thanks to Rusty Greer. That's a 2-run home run. Texas up now 3-0, bottom of the second, thanks to a Juan Gonzalez homer, his 27th of the season. There's your score. Back to you, Joe and John.
Thanks, Linda. And the Rangers can gain ground on Seattle. The Mariners, or rather, they need a win to keep pace with Seattle. Seattle won in Anaheim, 6-2. Ken Griffey Jr. a couple of home runs. The Rangers leading Seattle by 4 at the start of the day. They've been getting some very big crowds there in Texas. At last look, Joe, they were 3rd in the league in attendance there. So fans have responded to Johnny Oates' talented ball club. Eric Young, the hitter, 0-1 the count, runner at second, and nobody out. Eric Young, he in the count now, 1 ball and 1 strike to Eric Young. 1 out with a man at second here in the 3rd inning. Young broke his hand before spring training trying to bunt against a pitching machine. But while he was out with a cast in his hand, Don Baylor told us that he went and worked with one of the coaches on his base stealing, and he's got 32 steals this year. Tagging at second is McCracken. but he's just bluffing. It's Finley. Fires a shot into the cutoff man, Gomez. Eric Young, Joe, I mean, he didn't do much here, but he's having a very fine season. And his favorite player as a youth, his idol, was you, Joe Morgan.
Well, we talked before the ball game, and he is, I mean, he's a very good player. He's developed, he worked hard, and made himself a good player. I mean, while he was out, he worked on his defense as well, and I think the defense is the most improvement that he's made as a player. He's playing second base. He has become a very adequate second baseman, and he'll probably get better if he continues to work hard.
Eric used to be a wide receiver at Rockies. Weiss, the hitter, runner at second, 2 down now. Young said he pursued baseball instead of football because he didn't like the way he felt when he woke up the day after a football game.
It's a good enough reason to play baseball.
It was an expansion draft pick up of the Rockies as well. Weiss down the left field line, but foul. And a punch run along the line, but it's now 0-2. Weiss is 0 for 1. And Young, Joe, he kind of reminds me, not only has he patted himself as a ball player after you, but also in his post-baseball life, because he got his business degree, and he's already looking at different business opportunities for when he's finished with his baseball career. He worked for the owner of the Rockies, Jerry McMorris's trucking company, after the '93 season. And to learn about the trucking business, he spent time in each department to learn the whole business.
Well, young second baseman from the Bay Area, they do things like that.
It's a Bay Area thing.
Yeah, it's a Bay Area thing.
They teach them well there. Coming up Wednesday night baseball on ESPN, a big doubleheader. Chipper Jones, Fred McGriff, the Atlanta Braves, first in the East against Ron Gant, and the first place Cardinals from the Central. Then it'll be Greg Vaughn leading the league in RBIs, Ken Griffey Jr., the Brewers and Mariners at 10:30 Eastern, immediately following. 1-2 now to Walt Weiss. The Cardinals have been very hot. They've been really, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, been the best ball in the National League. Oh, he struck him out with a changeup, and that ends the inning. So another leadoff single, but no runs. Tewksbury himself coming up, then Rickey Henderson, 1-0 San Diego. The wind is blowing out here in the Mission Valley of San Diego. I'm John Miller with Joe Morgan. Sunday night baseball every Sunday all through the season. Just tune us in at 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific, and here you'll find us. We'll have a ball game every Sunday for you. Bob Tewksbury leads it off. Beautiful night out here, and a big crowd at Jack Murphy Stadium. Marvin Freeman trailing 1-0. And there's a called strike to Tewksbury. And the new ownership here, Joe, the John Moores and President Larry Lucchino, they worked very hard to try and make the Padres an integral part of this community again. A lot of negatives when they came in here after the Padres had years of losing teams, and then of course the debacle when they had that fire sale of their biggest stars about 3 years ago. But obviously with the crowds turning out, they've done some good things here. And of course the number one thing is they've got a team in the pennant race.
Well, I think it's important that they do show the fans that they are going to be fan-friendly for the next couple of years, because they're trying to get a new stadium.
That's John Moores, the new owner of the ball club. Strike 3 called to Tewksbury in the outside corner. Speaking of that, Joe, as Rickey Henderson comes up now, you mentioned about Rickey's on-base average, but he's not hitting the ball that well. John Moores okayed the expenditure to bring Rickey here. Rickey, with that low batting average, still has a 400-plus on-base average. We asked him about that.
I think it's always frustrated me when people are talking about batting average. You know, even when I hit 300, and sometimes I'm still on base just 402 or something, and I'm probably more frustrated that I didn't have a higher on base percentage, and to me they feel that was a great year. But sometimes when I'm here, I have hit 260 and I have had 420, 440 on base percentage. To me, I had an outstanding year, but most people complain about the average more than anything.
Well, John, I agree with him in that a batting average is more of a personal thing. What you do for the team is important. But I disagree that, you know, he's happy hitting 227, even though he has a 402 on base percentage. I believe that Rickey Henderson's pride and and the fact that he has been an excellent player throughout his career, it has to be hurting him that he's hitting 227. And he also knows that, that he's adjusting to a new league. I talked to him about that. He said he's adjusting to a new league. He's also adjusting to new umpires. A lot of these things are reasons rather than the cause. I really think that he's just not aggressive enough. The Rickey Henderson that I knew was always aggressive. You throw him a first pitch fastball, sometimes he'd take it, other times he may hit it over the left field wall. You do not see him swinging at a lot of first pitches now. And he could always drive in a run because he was a good hitter. You get a runner at second base, they throw breaking balls away, he'd line the ball the other way.
There's that splitter, and Rickey Henderson gets the walk. The appeal denied by Randy Marsh. So Rickey walks for the 83rd time this year. That's the first walk allowed tonight by Marvin Freeman. 1 out, 1 on. And Chris Gomez. Of course, when you think Rickey Henderson, you think stolen base. He's stolen more than any player in history. And although he's not as prolific as he once was, and Joe, let's face it, who is?
Yeah.
He has stolen 24 times this year and been caught only 7. That's still a pretty good percentage. Chris Gomez struck out his first time. Walt Weiss can't handle it. Look at that. The recovery for the out at second base. An acrobatic play, almost with a sleight of hand, but Henderson does move to second. I'm not sure how he recovered even to get the 1 out that time.
Well, he charged the ball, in my opinion, too quickly. He could have waited and at least gotten Rickey Henderson off the bag. If he'd have waited, see, he had plenty of time to throw to second base and get Rickey Henderson. He may not have had a chance to get a double play. See, if he waits back right there, catches on the big hop, you see Eric Young at second base, Rickey Henderson's not even in the picture. He would have at least been able to take Rickey Henderson off the bases. But he chose to try to charge it and complete the double play, and he couldn't do that.
Here's Steve Findlay. And he takes ball 1. In other words, if he waited a little bit, he could have had the lead runner and not a double play.
And keep the runoff for second out of scoring position.
Good. Now here's one of the Padres' top RBI men with a chance to drive in a run with a base hit. Findlay grounded to second his first time. And he fouls this one down off his foot. 1 ball, 1 strike.
John, as an infielder, your first thought is to make the double play, but I think as soon as you see the ball, as you may get an erratic hop, you have to stop, take it on the big hop, and just take 1 at second base. But again, it's very easy from up here.
But aesthetically, and I'm thinking of the gymnastics competition here, especially. I mean, what a play he eventually did make to get the man out that he did get out.
You're right.
I enjoyed that part of it. Right to Walt Weiss. And Findlay retired, and so are the Padres. The big guns are coming up now. Ellis Burks, Dante Bichette, Andres Galarraga. 1-0 Padres after 3. It's 1-0 Padres as we go to the 4th, and the big hitters coming up here for the Rockies.
John, let's take a look at the Rockies lineup. Right here is the power of the Rockies. All of those hitters are right-handed. And you mentioned the loss of Larry Walker, who is a left-handed hitter. He could fit in between Bichette and Galarraga. He could fit in between Burks and Bichette. He would add another element to a pitcher's problems. A lot of times a pitcher gets in a groove if he throws to 4 or 5 right-handers in a row.
Ellis Burks, ball 1.
And I think we've seen that with Tewksbury. In the first inning, he was away, and then he jammed the hitter. And I think if you get into a groove like that, where you face 4 or 5 in a row, it really helps you as a pitcher.
Caminiti. Ellis Burks is 0 for 2 in this game. 1 man down, and now Dante Bichette is coming up.
I remember Sparky Anderson always wanted to have a lefty, right, left, right, so that they would not be able to do that. Even when you get late in the ball game, you can't bring in one reliever to pitch to 3 or 4 guys in a row.
Dante Bichette had such a big year last year. 40 homers and led the league in RBIs, hit well over 300 for the year. And he was invited down to the Ted Williams Hitters Museum down there in Florida. He's one of the top hitters in the league last year. He's jammed. And is thrown out by Gomez. 2 men down.
Now, let me make a point here. We talked to Don Baylor, and he said one of the problems that he felt his team had on the road is they do not adjust to what a pitcher is doing to them. Now, I have sat here and watched Tewksbury pitch to all of these right-handed hitters the same way. I mean, Bichette's first pitch, here he got jammed last time up, and here's the first pitch, he gets jammed again. So what Don Baylor's talking about, they're not making the adjustments that they should make on the road. Sorry, now he was invited to Ted Williams Museum.
Andre, well, I want to hear those comments every time you want to make them, Joe.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I got that in.
Galarraga with ball 1. And right to Caminetti. Hit it sharply. The 3 ground ball outs. Only 5 pitches thrown by Tewksbury. He's making it look pretty easy so far. Caminetti coming up, then Joyner. 1-0 San Diego. 1-0 Padres. We go to the last of the 4th inning. There's Dan Warthen, the pitching coach of the Padres. He's wearing a microphone, and he made some comments before the last inning about Dante Bichette. Here they are.
Dante swinging at the first pitch no matter what right here, finally. Yep. This, of course, is just impossible.
Yeah. Dante Bichette swinging at the first pitch when he comes up here. Unless, of course, it's impossible. Yeah. Here's Ken Caminetti to lead it off for the Padres now. And he is not first ball swinging, taking down and away for ball 1. Well, here's what happened on the first pitch to Dante Bichette. Just as Warthen predicted. A swing.
And not a good pitch to hit either. Because he was jammed, and he helped jam himself.
But that's a little advantage for a guy like Tewksbury, right? I mean, if his pitching coach is thinking that, then Tewksbury must be thinking it.
And it's funny, but a lot of times you sit on the bench, and each hitter has quirks that you know about, and they're usually true to form. A lot of guys will swing at the first high fastball they see. A lot of guys will swing at the first breaking ball. There are a lot of different quirks that hitters have, but pitchers are the same way. There are some pitchers with a runner at second base. They will always throw the same pitch on the first pitch, no matter who the hitter is.
2-1. And it's hit high and deep down the left field line. Burt's there, and that is out number 1. So Caminetti flies out to left here after doubling his first time. He had scored the game's only run. 1 down in the 4th inning. The batter, Wally Joyner. The Dodgers beat the Giants 7-6 earlier at Candlestick Park after first blowing a 6-2 lead in that ball game. So the Dodgers, who at the start of the day were a game behind the Padres with the Rockies a half game out. Right there. 3 of them very tightly bunched. Here's Wally Joyner. The winner of this game tonight will be the first place team at the end of the day. Good fastball by Marvin Freeman, but a little bit low apparently. Ball 1. Wally Joyner. Pretty good pickup, I'd say, by Kevin Tower, the new general manager of the Padres. He replaced Randy Smith when Randy took over with the Detroit Tigers. Base hit for Wally Joyner. And he's always been very good at doing just that.
The fastball out over the plate, and Joyner just lines it right back up the middle for a base hit to center field. The fastball actually ran in towards him a little bit, but he didn't try to pull it. This is a line drive to center field.
He hurt his left thumb, and he said it's still not quite right, but it's well enough for him to play now. Tore some ligaments in there, and he said it won't be quite right probably till next season. Newfield is one at second. Flies back to first. Safe at first.
And not a good feed at second base there by Eric Young that time. He actually got Weiss caught in the middle and off balance. This throw should have been more to the outside, the left field side. Now watch what happens here. See, it's back on the inside. He handcuffs Weiss, and Weiss cannot get enough on his throw. There you see it again.
So that might have cost him a second.
Well, it definitely cost him the double play. If he could have gotten it to him a little more sharply, he would have been able to turn the double play.
Pretty close play, though, at first base, nonetheless. And I think you're about to say that. If they'd called him out, you wouldn't have been complaining. Yeah,
you're right.
John Flaherty, he singled home the first run of the game. Why not? He's the hottest hitter around now with a 23-game hitting streak. John Flaherty with the Tigers. Before that with Boston. That's fouled down the right field line. Now, Flaherty was a guy that a lot of managers around baseball liked when he was with the Tigers. They were other teams who wanted him, but he wasn't hitting any .365 in Detroit. 250, 4 homers in 47 games, .365, and more homers in half as many games in a new league. I mean, Rickey Henderson had some hard times adjusting to the new pitches and all of that sort of thing, but it's been kind of a breeze for John Flaherty.
Well, John, players will tell you, hey, I was playing just as hard in Detroit. I was doing everything in Detroit that I was doing here.
Weiss will take it himself, and that ends the inning. Newfield is forced out. Hold that thought, Joe.
All right.
Castilla coming up for the Rockies, 1-0 Padres.
Linda Cohn in the ESPN studios. Back to Arlington, Oakland. Geronimo Baroja's RBI double made it 3-1. And then Terry Steinbach ties up the game with his 20th home run of the year. We're tied at 3. That's the score in the top of the 4th. Now back to the Murph with John and Joe.
Thanks, Linda. And indeed, here we are back at the Murph. The Oakland Athletics, we'll see them in a couple of weeks on Sunday Night Baseball. That was their 157th home run of the year, a record pace. And you see the standings over there. I mean, Oakland not exactly right in the middle of the race yet, but if they win tonight, they'll be 6.5 out over there. And who would have thought it? I mean, this is a ball club that went with a no-name pitching staff, almost all young, unproven pitchers, and Mark McGwire is healthy. What a difference he alone makes to that lineup. He's got to be the most destructive, powerful hitter of the game today. Vinny Castilla, speaking of power, he's got some. He fouls this one off, and it is 0-2 as he faces Bob Tewksbury. Castilla grounded to short his first time. 1-0. The Pods lead the Rockies here in the 5th. Now, when these teams played in Denver, I mean, we weren't having games like this. I mean, Colorado scored 40 runs in the 3-game series in one ball game. They were behind 9-2 in the 7th inning, and the Rockies scored 11 runs. Came back and won that ball game. They've had a few disparities in their series like that home and road. They had 52 runs in a 4-game series at home against the Dodgers. Down he goes. Another tough pitch by Tewksbury, his 3rd strikeout. Well, we asked Don Baylor, the manager, about the Rockies' difference between home and road and their adjustments. Here's what he said.
Hitters make adjustments. Swingers are just swingers home and away, and until you classify yourself as a true hitter, you have to be able to make adjustments. You have to look for pitches. You have to back off the plate. If the guy's pitching in, you can't get to the ball. You have to move on top of the plate. So you have to move around in the batter's box. You can't stand and hit Tom Glavine where you're going to hit John Smoltz.
Well, Jeff Reed, first ball swinging. He's hit a comebacker. Nice play by Tewksbury. 2 men are gone, but Joe, I think we've seen, as you pointed out, what Baylor was talking about already here tonight from his Rocky lineup.
Well, and you would think that the guys won't understand what he's saying is that the guy's jamming you, you move off the plate a little bit and make him go away from what he's getting you out with on this particular night. If he's pitching you away, getting you out, you move closer to the plate. So that's exactly what he's talking about.
Quentin McCracken, big overhand curveball, strike 1 call. He singled and stole a base his first time. So he is 1 for 1. 1-0. The Padres ahead in the top of the 5th. The Rockies have only 2 hits in the game against Tewksbury. That curve is outside for a ball. 1-1.
For all those people who may not have understood what he said swingers are just swingers, whether they're in Colorado or on the road. By that he means guys that walk up there and just swing the bat. They do not have an idea. They do not try to set the pitcher up or try to adjust to what the pitcher's doing. And he said, you're never going to be a hitter until you learn to make adjustments. And I think that's what he's trying to say there. But also, by the same token, it has to be very frustrating for a person like Don Baylor, who was a hitting instructor, who has tried to teach guys to make adjustments throughout his career before he became a manager. So it has to be frustrating because he was a guy that made adjustments himself. So it's an interesting concept in that may be part of the reason that they hit so well in Colorado. In Colorado, you can just be a swinger and hit fly balls that go out of the ballpark. On the road, you have to be hitters and make adjustments to what the pitcher's doing to you. Maybe they're not making those adjustments.
Chris Gomez can't get to it. Base hit from McCracken. That's the 3rd hit of the game for the Rockies, and it will bring up Marvin Freeman, the pitcher, with 2 down. McCracken at first. Well, we're talking about the Rockies and their difference between the home and the road, and you see that they had the best home record in all of Major League Baseball, but just a horrendous road record. But look at this. I mean, 8.3 runs a game at home, but the worst on the road. They hit only 223 on the road, and unlike last year where they actually pitched well on the road, they're not even pitching well away from home. Freeman drives one right to Steve Finley on the sideline. They've been shut out on 3 hits for 5 innings by Tewksbury. 1-0 San Diego halfway through it. Sunday Night Baseball, and guess where we are? Yeah, Southern California. How could you tell? 1-0 the Padres over the Rockies. Thursday night at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. It's Major League Soccer on ESPN 2 with the Tampa Bay Mutiny taking on the Columbus Crew. Tampa Bay with superstar Carlos Valderrama leading the Eastern Conference. That's Tampa Bay and Columbus Thursday at 7:30 Eastern on ESPN 2. Here is Jody Reed to lead it off for the Padres. We go to the last of the 5th inning. They had a huge crowd, I guess it was last Sunday for the Major League Soccer All-Star Game at Giant Stadium. 78,000 for that one, Joe. I think that we should be working all the games when they have big crowds like that.
You could work it. I couldn't analyze soccer.
The beauty of soccer, Joe, is it's such a simple sport.
They just run up and down the field.
As they used to say in Tampa, soccer is a kick in the grass. There's a base hit for Jody Reed. And here comes Bob Tewksbury now. Jody Reed with his first hit, the 4th hit for the Padres, who lead 1-0. We're talking about the Rockies and the way they hit at home versus on the road, and some of the reasons, perhaps. I mean, they're all theories. Don Baylor has a theory. But look how their opponents hit. Now, of course, so it goes a little bit beyond just the fact that the Rockies take advantage of the light air. I mean, they hit much better than their opponents who, if you follow that one bit of logic, I mean, the opponent should hit even better than the Rockies if they're all better hitters, but that's not the way it works. The Rockies are .344 average. As a team at home, the opposition .301. Something the opposition takes advantage of the elements, but not quite as much as the Rockies do. Tewksbury bunting the ball, but fouling it.
John, along those lines, I think the key for me is the way that the Rockies treated the Atlanta Braves pitching staff when they went into Coors Field. The Atlanta Braves pitchers make adjustments to hitters better than anyone else, and they dominate hitters probably better than any other pitching staff in the league. Yet, they were roughed up in Coors Field as well.
Oh, they gave up 35 runs in 3 games there. They gave up 19 in one game and 13 in the next when they were there. Tewksbury swinging away after showing bunt, and down he goes. That's the 5th strikeout for Marvin Freeman. So Tewksbury trying to help himself and get that runner over, and he was unable to do it.
John, I think he'd helped himself more if he could have bunted the ball. I still think that he should have been bunting here. That swing really serves no purpose. Even if you try to bunt him over and you foul it off, one more run in a game like this is very, very important. If he bunts him to second base, even though Rickey Henderson hitting 185 with the runners in scoring position, I still think you have to give him an opportunity to do so. I mean, this is a close ball game still. One more run would make a big difference to Tewksbury.
Plus, I mean, it's now as though Tewksbury has shown himself to be much of a hitter this year. He's now 2 for 46. There's Bruce Bochy, manager of the Padres. Back to the bag at first is Jody Reed. Galarraga on the bag with him. Jody, not much of a threat to try and steal a base. He has only 2 steals for the year. Rickey Henderson. Jody Reed, the former Red Sox second baseman. Rickey Henderson, formerly with Oakland and the Yankees. They got a few formerly with players on this club. Ken Caminiti, the former Astro. Steve Finley, the former Astro, former Oriole. Wally Joyner, the former Angel, the former Royal. And, of course, 2 guys that just picked up from Detroit. Let me just say, former Tigers. John Flaherty and Chris Gomez. And, of course, there was that huge trade made by former general manager Randy Smith. And now he's in Detroit. And his successor, Kevin Towers, the man who made the trade with Randy Smith to get Gomez and Flaherty, who've been so important to the Padres. Shortstop White's the second one. Young back to first. Double play. Rickey Henderson hits into a pair. One of the 3rd time all year he's hit into a double play. Top of the order coming. Young will be leading it off. 1-0 Pod. Top of the 6th inning now. 1-0. The Padres lead the Rockies.
And let's take a look at the double play Rickey Henderson hit into. He was at least aggressive. He swung at the first strike he saw. But anytime you hit a ball near the bag where there's a short throw and one long throw, you're going to have trouble beating it out, and Rickey can't get there. And a nice turn at second base by Young. He gets the ball, steps back, and gets rid of the ball very quickly. Nice play there by Young at second base.
Tony Reed came in hard with the slide, but Young went right over the top of it. And here is Eric Young to lead it off now. And truly, he is the leadoff man in this inning, and they need him to get something started. He's been awfully good at it this year. Tewksbury throws him a called strike. 1 ball, 1 strike. Young with an on-base average of .429 coming into this game. So in addition to having a great batting average over .340, take an occasional walk, and he makes things happen when he gets on base. Stole 6 bases in one game against the Dodgers in one of the most memorable games of the year when the Rockies beat the Dodgers 16-15. And even as high scoring as they've been playing in Denver this year, even that is a little above average. See Young showing a steady line of improvement. Off the edge of the glove of Tewksbury, and a nice play by Gomez to get the speedy Young and keep him off the base paths.
This is what we were talking about earlier. The Padres play good defense, and they got Leo Gomez to play. Gomez to play. Chris Gomez to play shortstop. And watch him, he charges the ball, and that's the tough hop. He gets it on the in-between hop and makes the play. Young gets out of the box quickly. That's the disadvantage of coming from the right side, though. If he would have been left-handed, he'd have beat this ball out.
So Chris Gomez, after the ball hit off the glove of Tewksbury. Tewksbury will get an assist in the play as well. 1-6-3 for the put out. And here is Walt Weiss taking called strike 1. Weiss, by the way, says that this infield may be the best infield on which to play in the National League right now.
Interesting.
And that's a far cry from the old days.
Used to be one of the worst in the National League.
I said, well, how long has it been this good? He said, well, since last year, which is, of course, the time of the new ownership here in San Diego. Bounding ball to second. Jody Reed. And Tewksbury continues to make it real easy. Now, here's an update with Linda Cohn.
Thanks, John. Back to Arlington. The league leaders in homers. The A's strike again. This time, Scott Brocious. Brocious will break open a tie game right there. A 3-run home run, his 16th of the year. This one coming off Darren Oliver. It knocked Oliver out of the game. 6-3 A's, bottom 4.
And an Oakland ball club is just in one of those zones right now. They've got the young guys, Brocious, who's blossomed this year, hitting well over 300. Jason Giambi, and of course, the man in the middle of it all, Mark McGuire. But Terry Steinbach is having his biggest year for home run hitting. Geronimo Baroa. It's amazing, Joe. I mean, they're slugging the ball. And these young pitchers, partly benefiting by that, have shown great improvement as well. Darren Oliver has been one of the outstanding pitchers for the Rangers this year. Ellis Burks has struck out and grounded out. That's a drive deep to center. Back goes Finley. Now he's there. He makes the grab right at the edge of the warning track. You know, in Denver, I think that ball, Gomez, then Finley. Last of the 6th, 1-0. The Padres over the Rockies now. One of the differences of playing here at sea level versus Denver, the ball, they say, carries about 9% further under the similar conditions and a mile high versus here at sea level. And look where Burks hit this ball. Finley right at the edge of the warning track. What, maybe 15 feet from the wall out there. That same ball at Mile High Stadium goes maybe 30 or more feet deeper under the same conditions.
Well, if they use the 9% rule, it would go 36 feet more.
Here is Chris Gomez, the number 2 hitter in the order. And he fouls one off against Marvin Freeman. He'll be followed by Finley and then Caminiti. But in other words, even though the fences are deeper there, that's a ball that in Denver is a home run.
I agree with you, John, and I think sometimes we have a tendency to make a little bit too much out of the ballpark there in Coors Field because, again, it's Major League ballpark. They play Major League Baseball. They have Major League pitchers there. And everyone that plays there does not hit 30 or 40 home runs. So I think sometimes we have to look at Bichette, Burks, Galarraga and the rest of them and think, you know, what they would do someplace else. I still think they're all pretty good hitters. They're all good players. They may not accomplish the exact same number, but there are guys who play in, say, Wrigley Field or Fenway Park or the Kingdome or the Metrodome.
Benefit by friendly dimension.
By friendly dimension. So it's a difficult situation to, you know, say analyze and say, well, these guys are not as good of players they seem to be because they play in Coors Field. I don't really buy that myself personally.
One down as Chris Gomez is down on strikes, a 6th strikeout. Well, I was talking to Rico Petrocelli yesterday at Fenway Park before a game, and of course he hit 40 home runs in the season. Finley shoots one right back at Freeman, and somehow he's able to knock it down. He lost his glove, but he got the put out, and Finley is now 0 for 3. Nice defensive play there by Freeman, robbing Finley of a hit.
And that's interesting because he gave up a base hit earlier because he falls off to the first base side. But this time, watch, he stays right there. So it must have been the pitch. It was a fastball. He gets his glove on it, which is all you want to do. The ball knocks his glove off, but he's not injured, and that's the important thing.
Now Ken Caminiti with 2 down. And that's foul. He has doubled and scored the game's only run, and he has flied to left. But Rico said that, you know, when he played at Fenway, he always felt comfortable and confident. If he hit one well, you knew it was going to go out. But then you go on the road, those same balls didn't go out. He says guys had a thing in the back of their mind, too, that, hey, I'm supposed to be a home run hitter. I'm supposed to deliver the big hit. And sometimes they went out of their game plan a little bit, maybe. But the mere fact that they just weren't as confident and comfortable, he said, probably was something that hurt the Red Sox in those days on the road. And for years, of course, people always felt like the Red Sox were hurt because Fenway was such a great place to hit. And then when they went on the road, the Red Sox invariably never did as well. And right now we're seeing that from the Rockies. I mean, something we saw for years from the Red Sox, we're seeing from the Rockies right now. I mean, the worst on the road, the best at home. Quite a disparity.
Yes.
And it's got to be just more than it's easier to hit in Denver.
Right.
Because they out-hit the other team. Base hit for Caminiti. He's 2 for 3. Now Wally Joyner. In fact, the Rockies so far have a chance to make some history, which they probably would rather not make, for the largest disparity between home winning percentage and road winning percentage. The Twins most recently had a huge run. Remember that 87 ball club? They were great at home and way below 500 on the road, and even in the World Series that year when they had the 4 home games. But look at that, the Rockies, much bigger disparity than any team in history up till now. May not finish that way, and if they're going to win a pennant,
they can't finish that.
Yeah, they've got to get it going on the road. Wally Joyner hitting a foul ball. Wally has tapped one that was played by the catcher, and he has singled 1 for 2. Anyway, we're making much of this, but I think the whole point is we're trying to illustrate the fact that, I mean, it's a given, it's an easier place to hit Denver, but with their hitters, it's not just a question of them benefiting from that, because we see that they out-hit the opposition with proven hitters who hit well elsewhere when they come to Denver. So it's a little more complicated than just...
I think it's very complicated. It really is.
Red Sox out-hit the other teams when they came to Fenway for years. Cubs often at Wrigley. Wally Joyner, and the fans here have adopted him as one of their favorites for sure. Many chanting Wally as he comes up here. Joyner may be an underappreciated player over the years, Joe. I mean, not a flashy kind of a player, but I mean, how many have been better with the glove at first base than him over the years? Always hits around 300. Marvin Freeman catches down center. By the way, Marvin Freeman is pitching a heck of a game here in the Padres home ballpark. A big game for both teams. The Padres are going on a week-long road trip, and they've got a lot of road games coming up after that as well. They may be on their most difficult part of their schedule now for the next 2 or 3 weeks after tonight's game. So Bruce Bochy and his club know well that this is a big game for them to win before they head out. There goes the runner. Strike call. And it's a steal, but it doesn't matter because Wally Joyner has been called out on strikes to end the inning, so no steal. It was all for naught. 1-0 Padres. Bichette, Galarraga, Castilla coming up. I'm John Miller, Joe Morgan, and let me tell you, Joe hit Everywhere. I mean, whether it was the Astrodome or Houston, he was telling me himself the other night, he said, don't even look at my stats, John. I hit well everywhere and against every pitcher. Isn't that right, Joe?
No, that's not right, John. Some parks are better for hitters than other ballparks.
Who's the team to beat in this Western Division? The winner tonight is in first place, but are the Dodgers still the team to beat?
I still think the Dodgers are because they have the pitching and they still have some power. And I think down the stretch, power is still going to be important. And I think the Giants have some power, and I think that is one of the downfalls of the San Diego Padres.
Here is Dante Bichette, speaking of power, and he hits a foul. Again, first ball swinging, as he's been doing. As Dan Worthen, the Padres pitching coach, may well have predicted again. Well, there's a single, and he has grounded out.
There's a difference between being a first ball hitter and just a guy first ball swinger. If you get a good pitch to hit, you should hit it. I think what Wharton is saying, he's going to swing no matter where the pitch is.
Slider misses from Bob Tewksbury. Tewksbury has been weaving his artistry here tonight. A 3-hit shutout going. He has not walked anybody. 4 strikeouts. Look at that. Beautiful curveball. And he had Bichette's knees buckling. 1 and 2.
Well, the fastballs that he threw to Bichette the first couple of bats, jamming him, that sets up anything he wants to do away from Bichette, because Bichette is always looking for that pitch inside.
Strike 3 called, and I guess that was in the column of, hey, when you're always around the plate, you get some pitches maybe that aren't quite there.
But by the same token, as I said, he had him set up where he could, anything he threw away was going to get Bichette out, because he is definitely protecting against the inside. Here's a breaking ball. See, look at him open up inside, thinking the ball's going to be a fastball in, and a big breaking ball from Tewksbury. Now here's a fastball. Because he's opened up the outside corner, it's there for him.
Now here is Andres Galarraga. He's hit a comebacker, and he has grounded out to third. Now, each one of these men in this lineup, at this part of the lineup, are capable of tying this game with one swing of the bat. Talking about Burks, who very nearly got one in the 6th inning. Bichette here, now Galarraga, the man on deck, Castilla. Every pitch so vitally important. And quickly, he's ahead of the big cat, 0-2. And that slider, and Galarraga fouls it off. Galarraga with that wide-open stance, one of the more unusual stances in baseball. And he's a guy who's always gone up there to hack. I mean, he's been a great hitter, a batting champion his first year with the Rockies, but a guy who goes up there to swing.
Well, the reason he stands with an open stance, see, he gets both of his eyes pointed directly toward the pitcher. That gives you a better look at the pitch, and then he closes like a normal hitter does.
There's a high drive into right center field. Finley on the run. Newfield is there, though, and Newfield, the right fielder, takes it. Out number 2. Now Castilla is coming up.
John, let's try to take another quick look at Galarraga's stance and see why he does that. Well, see his head? Both of his eyes are pointed directly toward the pitcher. He gets a chance to see it. But when he strides, he steps in. He's just like a normal hitter right there. So that's why he does it. See, look at that perfect position. But you get a better look at the ball if you're facing the pitcher with both eyes like that.
Here's Vinny Castilla. And he takes a slider low for ball 1. Only the 75th pitch thrown by Tewksbury tonight. And here we are in the 7th inning. He has retired 14 of the last 15 men he has faced since McCracken's leadoff 3rd inning single. And this one could be trouble. And they let it roll foul. They got a San Diego bounce that time.
That's exactly what they got there. So it appeared that that ball was going to be a base hit, because no chance for Caminetti to be able to make a play on Castilla since he was so deep. Now I see no chance. That ball was at least 5 feet fair and roll foul.
Yeah, I thought 6 feet 2 inches. But you may be right. I may be wrong.
Looks like someone's wedge shot.
And that took a crazy bounce. So Castillo had a chance. An infield hit has to return. 1 ball, 1 strike. He's walking, and the fans are getting on him about it.
Yes.
Hurry up, they're telling him. And a beach ball has gotten onto the field out in right field. And now time is taken. They're going to get Mark Newfield will retrieve that beach ball. Thursday at 11 Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, it's first-round coverage of the British Senior Open. Former champs Gary Player, Bob Charles, and Tom Wargo among those expected to be in action. That's the British Senior Open beginning Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on ESPN. Jolly good. Here's the 1-1 pitch. That's a called strike 2 on the inside, and now Castilla, who didn't like the bounce a moment ago, it robbed him of a hit. Now didn't seem to like that call.
That's a breaking ball, and Castilla, I think, that stays inside and breaks around the plate and low.
Down and away, 2-2 to Castilla. Padres have been making a concerted effort to bring fans up from the Tijuana area. Not far from here, a very large population down there. Castilla himself hails from Mexico. And today, Joe, they had about 16 busloads. They have special promotions on all their Sunday home games where you can buy a ticket and get your ride included right up from Tijuana. And they've now had more than 100 busfuls who've come up this year for games. More than 10,000 tickets have been sold down there just with that one promotion. 3-2 the count. Into right center field. There's nobody there. That one into the alleyway. Finley over to cut it off. Castilla heading for second. Here comes the throw. Nice throw, but he's safe. Wow. Great throw by Finley, but Castilla apparently able to slide around the tag. His 26th double of the year.
Oh, that's good hustle there by Castilla, and also a great throw by Finley. Castilla makes this a double as soon as he leaves the batter's box. Finley comes up, fires a strike right on target. There's a tag applied, but you can see that Castilla beats it. He hustles all the way, did not take a look at the outfield. He slides in safely. Good hustle there. You can see that he is safe. Good call there.
Excellent call by Rich Rieker, the umpire on top of the play. Steve Finley, what a throw. So Castilla gets himself into scoring position, and now Jeff Reed tries to deliver it. And it's too low, ball 1. Now, usually around this time of the game is when a manager, in this case Bruce Bochy, of course Tewksbury's had a lot of managers over the years, this is about the time of the game where they start to look closely at him to see if he's starting to lose anything.
I agree. Normally you would do that, John, in the 7th inning, but tonight he has only thrown, a few pitches, so I don't think that you'd have to be as worried tonight as you normally would. I think he's throwing well. He's still spotting the ball well. The pitch to Castilla was down. It was not a pitch up in his eyes, and every pitch so far here to Reed has been down. So he still has good control. He's still bending. He doesn't seem to be tired.
And the curveball misses 3-0. You got the switch hitter, Quentin McCracken, who is 2 for 2 on deck. And now there is a stirring in that San Diego bullpen. The count, and it's the first walk allowed by Tewksbury. So Reed will take first with Castilla already at second. 2 men on, 2 men out, and Quentin McCracken with 2 hits out of the grand total of 4 for the Rockies. Will try and deliver a run now. There's Ron Valone, the hard-throwing left-hander, up in the bullpen. Meanwhile, Dan Warthen, the pitching coach, will go to the mound to speak to Bob Tewksbury here. So this is the first real crisis, or even something close to a crisis, that Tewksbury will have had to face. It's the first time in the game they've had 2 men on at the same time. They got Bichette as far as third base with 2 down in the second. McCracken got as far as second base with 1 out back in the 3rd inning. And those are the closest threats that they've had to getting a run in this game.
I think all you do if you're the pitching coach when you go out to talk to Bob Tewksbury or someone, a veteran who has been around a long time, is you just remind him of what the hitter's weakness is and how he matches up against that hitter. If he's better off throwing him breaking balls, to remind him of that.
Here's Quentin McCracken. 2 hits and a steal. 2 on, 2 out. Whoa. Slow curveball. 0-1.
A lot of pitching coaches believe you throw hard stuff to the veteran hitters and slow stuff to the young guys. Young guys are a little more impatient, ready to be more aggressive, ready to swing the bat. Veteran hitters know a little bit more about how you pitch as one of the scoring position. Out there, another breaking.
See it again. 0-2 the count. Plus, I mean, a young guy, he comes up there thinking, man, I got to deliver right now. They're counting on me.
So they're more susceptible to off-speed pitches. But now what do you do? I mean, I still believe you have to throw him another one. A lot of times they will waste a fastball or do whatever. Until a guy proves he can hit it, I think he should continue to throw it, especially in clutch situations.
Steele, second, Reed at first, 2 down. 1-0 Padres. Tewksbury steps off the slab and will start over. Both runners ready to go on anything here. Castilla, the possible tying run. A base hit to the outfield, and would probably bring home the tying run. He's hit well, as you see there in these spots. Fastball. Strike 3 call to the outside corner. Well, he didn't waste it. And it is 1-0 as we head to the last of the 7th. Padres.
Linda Cohn back in ESPN studios. Homer heaven in Arlington. An AL candidate for comeback player of the year. You got it. Kevin Elster, a 2-run home run, his 15th of the year. Pulled Texas to within 6-5 of Oakland, but then top of the 5th, Jason Giambi goes yard number 18 for him. 6 homers in this game overall, but the score is 7-6 Oakland in the bottom of the 5th. Back to John and Joe.
Yeah, well, that game is about as far away as you can get from our game as is possible. I mean, a wild ball game there, but here, Bob Tewksbury, who played for Texas last year, has a 4-hit shutout going. And that last inning before Quentin McCracken came up, remember Dan Wartham, the pitching coach, went to the mound and had a chat with Tewksbury, and here's what he said.
Just came out to give you a little blow, Tewks. Everything's going fine. I think we still got to stay slow. I think curveballs are going to be fine. I still think you can go ahead and backdoor a cutter or even a sinker. Let's keep the ball. If we're going hard, we're going to keep it to left field, keep the dirt in front of the broom. Right, we go.
Where do you start? If we throw a cutter, let's throw it out backdoor like you're saying. I don't want to come back in.
I want to start on second base. All right? And we stay with sinker if you need to come back. Hello, Michael.
All right.
Ready to go?
Started with a curveball, he said, and Joe, that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, that's exactly what he did. He threw him a couple of slow curves, but I keep the dirt in front of the broom. I've never heard that one before.
Come on, you don't know what that means?
No, I don't know what that means, John.
How'd you get all those hits away?
Hey, I guess...
Walt Weiss bobbles it, and Mark Newfield is safe. You know, it's been a tough year for Walt Weiss. That is his 24th error of the year, which is kind of a stunner.
That's too many errors, but and remember now, at the beginning of the year, Coors Field was not in great shape. At least that's what the players thought. But let's see what he does here. Well, he charges the ball.
Oh,
that ball took a little
bad hop there, yeah?
It took a hop. But, you know, to be honest with you, John, anybody can catch the good hops. The good shortstops have to catch the bad hops.
But what about getting the dirt before the broom? Here's John Flaherty. He has delivered the only run of the game with a single to center. And a foul tip into the glove of Jeff Reed. I mean, you're so tough on guys, Joe.
No, I mean, really, I mean...
It looks so easy from up here.
If you're...
Sure, you sit up here and you say that.
If you're an infielder, I mean, the first thing they tell you is anybody can catch the good hops. You have to be able to catch the bad hops. No, I mean, I'm not criticizing him. I'm just telling you that's what they tell you on the infield.
Yeah. Well, that's the difference between big league baseball and a lower level.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, they make it look so easy. They catch those bad hops all the time.
But that was not an easy play. I'm not saying that, but I mean, you have to be able to catch the bad hops.
Well, and here Walt Weiss had paid such a compliment to this infield.
Yes, I was going to ask you that. I wonder if he thinks that way, you know, right now, if he feels that this is still one of the best
infield. Joe had reached up and bit him. John Flaherty, high in the air, down the left field line, up into the sunlight for a while, back into the shadows where Burks makes the catch, and Flaherty is now 1 for 3. 36,686. The paid attendance at this ball game. About 142,000, Joe, for the 4 games of this series. And you know, the attendance in these last 3 weeks, when these Western Division teams have been playing each other for the first time, really, in a concerted stretch with 3 of them in a tight pennant race with each other, the attendance has been outstanding. It's gone way up for all of the teams in the West while they've been playing each other. Unfortunately, they won't do it again until the last 2 weeks of the season. Today marks the end of this stretch of games, about a 3-week period. Jody Reed, the hitter, is struck out looking, and he is singled. Newfield at first base. 1 out in the 7th inning. The Padres 1 and the Rockies nothing. Now, Marvin Freeman is probably pitching his final inning. He is scheduled to lead it off in the 8th inning. And there's been activity in the Rockies bullpen for a good long while. And meanwhile, the San Diego bullpen has gotten busy. Well, Freeman, I mean, the big ball game for his ball club on the road against a team that's been playing hot lately. Pitched quite a game for the Rockies here. With fastball, but inside and high. 1 ball to no strikes. Well, we mentioned the attendance. Before this stretch of games started, see the Dodgers drawing very well, but much better since this stretch against their other teams in the division. The Padres almost half again higher, and the Giants more than half again higher. Giants just drew with the Dodgers in town more than 140,000 for 4 games themselves, even though the Giants right now are not even really in the race. Giants had 36,000 today. There's Darren Holmes up in the Rockies bullpen. And sinker down and in for a ball. 2-0 the count to Reed.
What they're trying to do there, John, is keep Jody Reed from hitting the ball to right field in case there was a hit and run situation there. Now they've played right into Bochy's hands if he wants to hit and run. 2-0, 3-1, 2-1. Excellent hit and run counts.
And Reed's a guy very good at the hit and run play. In the dirt, and now he has been moved over. Giving chase on the ball is Jeff Reed, the catcher. Newfield is in scoring position on the wild pitch. But now, Joe, we're in the 7th inning. The pitcher's up next, and first base is open, but with 1 out. But a decision from Don Baylor needs to be made. It's already 3-0 to Jody Reed. Well,
it wouldn't be a decision for me, but Don Baylor thinks differently than I do in a lot of situations. You know, for me, I just go ahead and walk him, but I think what Bochy has tried to do is show that he has someone warmed in the bullpen in case he has to pinch hit here for Tewksbury. So
he's got Bachler up in his bullpen right now.
Yeah.
Does Bruce Bochy. That's outside. So he does walk him. Now Tewksbury is coming to the plate with 2 men on and 1 man out.
So here's the other part of that equation. Say they pinch hit for Tewksbury and you get the hitter out. Well, you've accomplished 2 things. You've gotten out of the inning, plus you've gotten Tewksbury out of the ball game.
In other words, by walking the hitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tewksbury, I mean, he has been able to shut them down. So if you can change, get him out of the ball game, you go ahead and take that opportunity.
Frank Funk, the pitching coach, out to the mound for the Rockies. Meanwhile, Dan Worthen with Bruce Bochy alongside, calling the Padres bullpen and telling Doug Bachler to go ahead and have a seat.
Well, that was more for a bluff.
He was bluffing.
Yeah.
And apparently Don Baylor thought he was bluffing. And Bachler, yeah. Doug, relax. Saturday at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific, the NFL returns to ESPN when the AFC champion Pittsburgh Steelers take on the San Diego Chargers live from Tokyo. That's the Chargers and Steelers next Saturday, 10 Eastern on ESPN. 2 great linebackers, Greg Lloyd and Junior Seau. And that one is the bunt. Nicely done. Jeff Reed throws out Tewksbury. Newfield to third. Jody Reed to second. And Rickey Henderson coming up in a big RBI spot. The situations where he has struggled all year.
Well, that's interesting. You remember earlier in the ballgame, Tewksbury could not get the bunt down. He does a great job, gets the barrel out front, gets the barrel above the ball, and makes a pretty good bunt there. And he moves the runners up into scoring position. Now a base hit by Rickey, and it's a big deal for him.
Eric Young over to take the throw at first base, so the catcher to the second baseman covering. So here's a big moment, maybe a pivotal moment in this game. A base hit puts the Padres ahead by 3 going into the 8th inning. But if Freeman gets Rickey, it's still anybody's game. 1-0 right now. Henderson is 0 for 2 with a walk. Low, ball 1. At third base, Newfield. He reached on the error by Weiss. At second base, Jody Reed, who walked.
Henderson 185 batting average with runners in scoring position.
Rick, you see that last year he led the majors in these kinds of situations, men in scoring position. This year, Rickey with only 21 RBIs. Nice pitch, knee-high, outside corner.
It's really all about confidence, John, when you say, well, how can a guy hit 400 one year and 185? It's really confidence in hitting the ball in these situations. Last year, Rickey felt everything was going his way. He could walk up there and get a base hit. Now he's wondering, can I get a base hit with a runner in scoring position? Because to me, he probably should have taken that first pitch there, fastball to right field.
That is strike 2. Now, Rickey argues with Mike Winters about the call. Rickey took extra hitting for 45 minutes yesterday, according to Bruce Bochy. As we look at that last pitch,
Rickey thinks this breaking ball is high, but you know, it's a that is
didn't look too high to me.
No, that's Winters strikes.
Yeah, just under the belt usually isn't too high. Rickey down in that deep crouch. 1-2 the count. Newfield at third. Reed at second. 2 down. Freeman delivers. She said slider and just did get a piece of it.
Well, see, again, he's lost his aggressiveness. He took the first fastball for a strike. He took a breaking ball. It was up a little bit, and Rickey's a pretty good breaking ball hitter. He took the breaking ball up, which he should have hit. Now he has to hit the pitcher's pitch, and that pitch was breaking down and away, and not much Rickey could do with it. I mean, you go from being in control to now having to hit the pitcher's pitch, and that's what Rickey has done to himself, I think, a lot this year.
Okay, so the base runners again. Newfield at third, Reed at second, ready to go at the crack of the bat with 2 down. Too high. Inside. 2-2 now to Rickey. Chris Gomez on deck. He would be next. Well, the big crowd here very quiet at the moment, knowing it's a tense spot. Of course, the Padres had the lead here, but if they don't get anything out of this, the Rockies, with just a little bit, could easily come back. 2-2. Right to the third baseman, but under his glove. Castilla couldn't handle it. Newfield scores. Reed is over to third base, and Rickey Henderson does not get the hit, but he does bring home the run. And the Rockies all of a sudden can't catch the ball. 2 errors in the inning, and a huge run has scored, even though the Padres do not have a hit in this inning.
Well, this ball is hit sharply. Let's see. You'll see Castilla right out there in front. You see, just does not stay down on it. See, this is a situation where maybe you get down on one knee. The ball's hit directly at you. You cannot let it go through your legs. But, you know, again, it happens.
Well, that's going to be it with Chris Gomez coming up. It's interesting. I mean, Freeman got his man, but the infielders just did not cooperate. And Freeman is out of the game. Darren Holmes coming on. 2-0 Padres. 2-0 Padres. And by Jove, it's Holmes.
It's interesting that he, you know, chose to take Marvin Freeman out at that particular time. I mean, he hasn't given up a base hit this inning, and he is the leadoff hitter. He would have been the leadoff hitter in the top of the 8th inning. And you would also, if you leave him in, you give him a chance to win a ball game because he has pitched well tonight. And he has also struck Gomez out a couple of times in this ball game.
Well, it's a tight spot inherited by Darren Holmes. Reed at third base. Rickey Henderson, always a threat to steal. At first base, Chris Gomez, the hitter. 0 for 3 tonight, but he's been a hot hitter. There goes Rickey already. What a jump he got. Well, the Rockies didn't even pay attention to him. Nobody covered. Nobody ever even looked at first base.
Well, that's smart that no one covered, John, because Darren Holmes with the high leg kick, there's no chance of holding Rickey Henderson at first base. That's another reason you wonder why he would take Freeman out. I mean, Rickey just kind of jogs on down the second base.
His 25th steal of the year. Now 2 men in scoring position. 1 ball and no strikes to Gomez. Steve Finley is on deck. Holmes has a great curveball. That one was more like a hard slider, but he's got a big dropping curveball as well. More bullpen activity, meanwhile, for the Rockies. Remember, the pitcher's spot is due to lead off in the 8th inning for Colorado. Holmes has not done well in keeping those inherited runners from scoring. That's a close strike. 2-1. 2/3 of the men who've been on base when he's come into games, as you see, Mike Munoz, a left-hander, warming up in the bullpen. 2/3 of the men that Holmes has inherited have scored. He inherits Reed, who's now at third, and Henderson, who's now at second here. 2-0 Padres. There's a big curveball hit high in the air to right center. And the shot pulls off McCracken, and that is the inning. An unearned run. We head to the 8th inning. The pitcher's spot, then Eric Young and Walt Weiss. 2-0 San Diego. The ESPN Sunday Night Baseball Game of the Week is brought to you by Burger King, where you can get your burger's worth. Perfect night for baseball from San Diego. 2-0. The Padres out in front as we head to the 8th inning now. Meanwhile, coming up on Wednesday, the big Wednesday Night Baseball doubleheader, and a lot of great action for you coming up on Wednesday, starting with the Atlanta Braves. Best in the East, Chipper Jones and company, against the best in the Central, the red-hot Cardinals under Tony La Russa. Ron Gant in the middle of that lineup. That's at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. Then Greg Vaughn, he leads the league in RBIs, taking on Ken Griffey. 2 more home runs today for Junior. That's 10:30 from the Kingdome, 7:30 Pacific. Big doubleheader right here, Wednesday Night Baseball on ESPN. Now here's John Vanderwall, pinch hitter deluxe, and he looks at a curveball from Tewksbury. Strike one call. Vanderwall, 268, 4 homers, 25 batted in. He is 10 for 32 as a pinch hitter. Right back to Tewksbury. And there's one away. Vanderwall pinch hitting for Darren Holmes. So Holmes only was in there to face the one man. And Mike Munoz continues to heat up in the Rockies bullpen, so we'll most likely see him in the last of the 8th inning. Here is leadoff man Eric Young. And Tewksbury has kept him off the base paths. 0 for 3. He's throwing a fastball up and in. A little bit of a different look there in the 4th at bat for Young. Throwing his ground to the 3rd, fly to center, and hit one back to Tewksbury, who deflected it and was handled by the shortstop Chris Gomez for the put out. 2-0 the countdown. The Padres bullpen is also busy, just in case Tewksbury shows any signs of faltering here. Bullpen will be ready. Chapman's in there for a strike. 2-1. The winner of this game will finish tonight atop the National League West. Curveball, base hit. Eric Young is aboard. Walt Weiss will come up now. But down by 2 runs, it's a little different than if he was just down by 1 run here.
Big difference in this ball game.
And Young's a guy who can steal a base and create a lot of trouble, but it's a little easier when you're just down by the 1, and he's the tying run.
Well, it also, him being on base helps Walt Weiss in a couple of ways. First of all, well, it looks like we may not get a chance to see Tewksbury pitch to Weiss. But what I was going to say is all of a sudden now, Tewksbury's gone to the breaking ball to the left-hander who led off this inning, John Vanderwall. He went to the breaking ball with Eric Young. And he would probably think to use the breaking ball against Weiss, who is a very good fastball hitter, except it looks like he's not going to be out there. Or is he?
Well, now Trevor Hoffman, the closer, had gotten up. And he is also warming up alongside Doug Bockler. Well, Dan Warthen just out there to have a chat. And let's go back now. Here's what he said. Well, with Walt Weiss coming up here, we will stay with the action instead. We reserve the right to change our minds on this. You do. What did he say? What did he say? Come on. Walt Weiss takes a strike. He has grounded to first, struck out, grounded to second. He's 0 for 3.
See, with Young at first base, that takes a little bit of the off-speed stuff away from Tewksbury because Weiss can hit the hole very easily on the right side, so he throws him a fastball tailing away. He's going to try to get him to hit a ground ball, obviously, to the shortstop or second base, but you do not want something slow and off-speed inside where he can pull it in the hole between first and second.
Eric Young, 3rd in the league, back of Lance Johnson of the Mets and Delino DeShields of the Dodgers. And he's just barely behind the 2 of them. That's a ball strike, and it's quickly 0-2 now to Walt Weiss.
And that's perfect pitching there from Tewksbury. 2 fastballs tailing over the outside corner. Weiss would have had trouble pulling those balls in the hole. And Weiss smartly took them. He was looking for a pitch that he could pull in the hole on the right side.
Weiss hitting 300 for the year. He's not an automatic out, and he's been particularly hot the last 3 weeks, hitting better than .340. Young at first, Joyner on the bag with him. 2-0, San Diego, top of the 8th. 1 out. The power up next. Pretty good eye there by Walt Weiss. 1 ball, 2 strikes.
Remember, he jammed twice in the first inning. He's thrown him 3 pitches away.
And that's a foul. I like the way Flaherty, Joe, before he sets the target, and he waits right until Tewksbury's ready to throw.
Well, that's something that he works with Tewksbury on. A lot of pitchers like the target a little sooner. A veteran like Tewksbury wants the target late so that the hitter doesn't know where it is, and I think that's the best way, to be honest with you. There you see Hoffman throwing in the Padres bullpen.
1-2 the count to Weiss. Ellis Burks on deck. Back to the bag is Eric Young.
Kind of interesting there. I think just the opposite of what you were talking about. Flaherty set up a little too quickly inside, and Tewksbury wanted to back off and start again. And now he's going to go away. That's interesting.
Tewksbury again stepped off. So you think that has to do with Flaherty? Maybe he's afraid he might be giving it away.
Well, on that particular pitch, he was.
Walt Weiss down on strikes. Out number 2. Now, before Weiss came up, Wortham was out there. And here is what he told Bob Tewksbury.
Still doing all right? All right, we're going to go sinkers away on this guy, see if we can get him roll over. All right, we can also go high and away if you want for a fly ball, but I just didn't get a ground ball double play right here. Vary your times at first base. He's going to try to get a jump on you. Okay. All right, let's go. Come on, big boy.
Well, it's a sinker away. He threw him all sinkers away because obviously he didn't want him to pull that ball in the hole, and that's the right pitch for that situation.
2 down, and here is Ellis Burks. A strike on the outside. Burks has struck out, grounded to third, and may have had one of the best hit balls of the game. He hit one to the edge of the warning track and very deep. Left center field his last time. He is the possible tying run and well capable of getting hold of one here. Tewksbury trying to make sure that he does not get a ball to pull.
Well, what he's going to do is make sure he stays away. If he hits the ball home run, he wants him to hit it to right field. He's not going to mess around inside unless he comes off the plate inside. He's not going to try to jam him with a fastball strike as he did earlier in the ball game. Because if you try to get the ball in and you've lost a little of your velocity and you move it 2 or 3 inches out over the plate, Burks will make you pay for it.
1 ball, 1 strike to Burks. Joyner still on the bag over there with Eric Young at first. There goes Young. Flaherty's thrown. It's a stolen base, number 33 for Eric Young. Meanwhile, the count to Burks goes to 2-1. Now he gets just a base hit to get 1 run out of it, plus he keeps the inning going to Bichette coming up.
He has a pretty good jump. Not a great jump. He's just very quick. And he beats the throw to second base. Tough pitch to throw on for Flaherty. Ball was in the dirt, but he still makes a good throw.
I like the way he looks behind the plate. He nailed a man in a big spot in the 9th inning on Friday. A strike in the outside. He looked outside, kind of drifted back over the corner. 2-2 now to Ellis Burks. Burks has never done that well against Tewksbury. Does have a home run in 19 previous at-bats. The outfield shaded a bit toward left. The infield also playing Burks to pull. The third baseman, Caminetti, well over near the line, and Joyner is over near the line at first base as they guard against the extra base hits along the line. As you see, the infield all kind of spread out now. 2-0 outside. Now it's a full count. Burks is hitting .331 for the year, although he's 0 for 3 tonight. There's Dante Bichette, and all he is the league's leading RBI man. Burks still standing way off the plate here against Tewksbury. Full count. Struck him out with a curveball. The 8th strikeout of the night for Tewksbury. 8 shutout innings for him. The shutout continues. 2-0 San Diego. Finley, Caminiti, and Joyner coming up.
Linda Cohn in the studios. Back to Arlington. Both sides taking a break from hitting homers 6 in this game. But Oakland's Scott Brocious comes through with his 3rd hit of the night. This one tries in Damon Mayshore to put the A's up 8-7 in the bottom of the 6th. 4 RBIs for Brocious in this one. But Texas is threatening. John and Joe.
All right, thanks, Linda. Doug Tewksbury may be finished for the night as he came into the dugout. He got the high fives and the handshakes from his teammates, and also there from Bruce Bochy and Dan Worthen. And the kind of reception from his teammates seems to have that air of finality about it, as if, good job, you did beautifully tonight. Congratulations on a job well done.
Now take a seat.
Yeah. We hope you enjoy the 9th inning from right here on the bench. Trevor Hoffman, of course, has been an outstanding closer for them. Here's Mike Munoz on to pitch now for the Colorado Rockies. The left-handed batting Steve Finley at the plate. 0 for 3. Grinded out 3 times, and he takes a strike. 2-0 San Diego in the last of the 8th inning. Finley has grounded a second, grounded a short, and hit a comeback. And that is a little bit low. John Vanderwall stays in the game to play left field for the Rockies after pinch hitting for Doug Holmes. So Burks is out, and Munoz will hit in the number 3 spot, Burks' spot, which will be 9th the next time around. High fly ball foul, and out of play on the 3rd base side. Interesting that Steve Finley showing all his power this year. He came up with Baltimore, and they used to have both he and Brady Anderson in the same ball club, and it was said that, hey, we can have one of these guys, but not both, because they're fast guys, but they don't hit home runs. They're just, you know, singles hitters. And you can only afford to have one guy like that in the outfield. And now both of them hitting the ball with power this year. Finley here and Brady Anderson still in Baltimore. 1-2 the count. Baltimore, by the way, may have lost Anderson for a while. He's got appendicitis, although they're saying that they're hoping that he does not have to have surgery and he might play with it, which I'm not a doctor, Joe, but I never heard of it. It may make medical history. Young can't get it. Base hit for Finley.
Well, Young appeared that he was going to be able to get to that ball, but the ball seemed like it just stayed down when he made a dive and went right underneath his glove. Watch, he almost gets there. Nice try there by Young. And if he would have come up with it, he probably would have been able to throw Finley out.
Finley with 14 steals in 19 attempts. Here is Ken Caminiti. He has doubled and scored a run, flied out to left, and singled. That was as a left-handed hitter against Marvin Freeman. Young to second. Weiss to first. Double play.
That was a more difficult play than it appeared. It was a great play, in fact, because the umpire at second base, Rick Riker, was in between Young and the ball. Now, watch, he'll lose it, but and the ball, it seemed like it takes a big hop, and he was able to stay with it and make the play. That's an excellent play there by Young. See how he gets out of the way? Now he comes up with a nice play, a nice feed to Weiss, and they turn it over. See, the umpire shielded him from the ball right there. He did not have a lot of time to find that ball after it passed the umpire. That's a great play there.
Good reflexes by Rieker over there at second base. Here is Wally Joyner. 1 for 3, and he takes a called strike. Now, Trevor Hoffman is back up in the San Diego bullpen. The Rockies have some of their biggest hitters due up in the 9th inning. Dante Bichette, Andres Galarraga, and Vinny Castilla. 2-0 San Diego. Munoz misses with the slider. 1-1 the count. Getaway night for both ball clubs. The Padres heading for Houston, and the Rockies are heading home, which is always welcome news for them and their fans. And that's another advantage they have when they play home, Joe. I mean, there's always 48,000 people there rooting them on. And they've won about 70% of the time in front of those sellout crowds. That's a called strike. 2-2 the count. In the ninth, Bichette, the leading RBI man in the league. Galarraga, the number 2 RBI man in the league. And Castilla, who has a double tonight. So they'll give it their best shot in the 9th inning. But against one of the real tough closers around, Trevor Hoffman. That's a full count now. 3-2 to join. A right-handed hitter, Mark Newfield, is on deck. Down the left field line. And giving chase out there is Vanderwall, but it's back into the bullpen area. Out of play. Well, actually, not out of play. That whole area is in play. The more unique areas in any ballpark, right? The bullpens go behind the stands, and yet the whole area is in play. And that is on both sides of the field. 2 areas like that here. 3-2 the count. And that one just missed. Ball 4. So Joyner gets the walk, which is not what Munoz wanted to see happen. Now you've got a string of right-handed batters coming up, starting with Rob Deere, who's going to pinch it for Mark Newfield. Rob Deere, the veteran who kind of dropped off the face of the earth. And now here he is back in the big leagues with the Padres, and he's hit 3 home runs in only 22 at-bats, including 1 pinch hit home run. Deere had gone to Japan and had not done well over there, and then was picked up by the Padres, went to the minors, and when Gwynn went down with an injury, they brought him up. And he takes a called strike. Deere, one of the strongest men in the game, always had high home run totals and prodigious strikeout totals. Milwaukee, an average year there for a 5-year period, 27 homers and 165 strikeouts. And the slider on the outside. 0-2 the count.
When he first came up with the Giants, he reminded people of Jack Clark. In fact, they thought he was going to be another Jack Clark. He just could not make up enough contact. And I mean, he has had the 22 at-bats you mentioned, but he's also struck out 12 times in those 22 at-bats so far this season.
He was afraid you were going to mention that. Strike 3 call. They'll make it 13 out of 23. 1 man left. Last chance for the Rockies. Bichette, Galarraga, Castilla against Trevor Hoffman. 2-0 San Diego. The 9th inning now. Sunday Night Baseball, the game of the week on ESPN. And there is Trevor Hoffman, the right-hander. Not as hard a thrower as he used to be. He had the rotator cuff surgery in the offseason, but still 6th in the league with 20 saves. And he's been awfully tough to hit. 49 innings, only 32 hits allowed. And look at those strikeouts. 64 strikeouts against only 14 walks. So the numbers are great. However, Joe, one number we're not showing there, 20 saves, but 5 blown saves, including 1 to the Rockies last week in Denver. There is Rob Deere staying in the game to play right field after he pinch hit for Mark Newfield. And Dante Bichette leads it off. Bichette, 1 for 3. Bichette hit a home run against him to cause him to blow a save in Denver. But that could not happen here with a 2-run lead and nobody on base. Bichette, now his job really just to try and get on somehow, get the inning started. Well,
He was listening to you.
nice thought. A curveball. Nice pitch.
Very rarely, does Bichette try to bunt, but I think it's a smart play. I mean, he's just trying to get on. Caminetti was back so deep that if he gets it down the third baseline, it would have been an easy base hit. But now he's in the hole 0-2.
Fastball. That's a high drive to right field along the line. Here. And it's fair ground. There's one away. Hit pretty well by Bichette, but an easy play for Deere.
You have been traveling a lot along the Rhine River.
Where has my mind gone? Here's Andres Galarraga. Meanwhile, as you look at all of the other scores, there's the Athletics ahead of the Rangers 9-7 at the top of the 7th. Down there in Arlington, and when I read that right, Terry Steinbach with 2 home runs in that game. There's ball one to Andres Galarraga. He's hit a comebacker, grounded out to third, and flied out to right center. Next Sunday, we'll be in Pittsburgh to see Jim Leland's Pirates against Jim Fragosi's Phillies. Phillies have gotten a few of their top players back lately. It's next Sunday, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. There's Bob Tewksbury, 8 shutout innings against a team that has only been shut out one time this year, home or road. The Rockies' only shutout, the only time they were shut out, was in Miami back on May the 11th when Al Leiter pitched a no-hitter against them. Nice pitch. 1-2 to Galarraga.
If you're a hitter, first thing you think about when you see Hoffman is the fastball. And that was a good breaking ball that he threw to Galarraga there.
There's the fastball, 91 miles an hour, but he missed with it. One thing I like that they do here, Joe, on the scoreboard out in right field, they post the speed of every pitch.
Pitching coaches do not like that.
They don't like it. Fans like it. Fan-friendly gesture. 2-2. See, we're doing it too.
Yeah.
Because we're fan-friendly, Joe. 3-2 to Galarraga. Well, he can't afford to walk him and make Castilla a powerful hitter, the possible tying run. 3-2 the count. He struck him out with the hard stuff.
That was an excellent pitch in that everything else was out away from Galarraga, and then he comes inside with a fastball. And Galarraga cannot get to it. See, the target's outside. That ball was back in. Just an excellent pitch there. That's not where he was supposed to throw it, not where Galarraga was looking for it. Good pitch.
2 down, and here's Castilla. Trevor Hoffman from a baseball family. His brother, Glenn Hoffman, played the big leagues for many years. As a shortstop and third baseman. There's the breaking ball, strike one. Castilla has grounded out, struck out, and doubled. The big crowd, more than 36,000 on its feet now. Sports Center right after the ball game. Stay tuned. 2 down, nobody out. And the curveball, strike 2 on the foul ball. And Don Baylor, yeah, hard to figure. Why are the Rockies so different, so incredibly different? More than 8 runs a game at home. Less than 4 runs a game on the road. And tonight, 1 strike away from being shut out for only the 2nd time this year.
I think you have to give Bob Tewksbury some credit tonight because he set them up early in this ball game by pitching them in and keeping them off balance.
Center field right to Finley. The Padres have won it, and they remain in first place in the National League West. 1 game up on the Dodgers, 1.5 on the Rockies. And the Padres tonight get a lift from Bob Tewksbury. Marvin Freeman pitched a heck of a game, but not quite as strong a game as pitched by Tewksbury.
Well, the excellent pitch ball game on both sides, but Tewksbury was the master. But again, Freeman just did not have much help from his offense tonight.
And so the West in the National League is finished playing head-to-head until mid-September. We'll see who's on top when they next meet. Bob Tewksbury, a winner for the 9th time. Hoffman with a save. Marvin Freeman, the hard luck loser. Now, Sports Center comes up next. Stay tuned for that. This has been a presentation of ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports television. John Miller for Joe Morgan. Good night from San Diego. The Padres beat the Rockies 2-0.